that you got my name right. I just wanted to comment that I've heard a lot about what we don't like. We don't want this. We don't want that. We should take our time. We don't need to rush this. This neighborhood character is going to be changed forever for the worse. This isn't about affordable housing. This is about the developers. Who do you guys think builds homes? Developers build homes. At one point, your home you live in was built by a developer. So this greedy agenda, can we have silence from the peanut gallery, please? So this is a revolutionary transformational plan, and I think it is transformational. It's going to modernize Evanston to the 21st century, and it's going to look at data such as supply and demand, simple market forces that affect everybody. People want to keep things the same, but currently Evanston is very unaffordable. I don't know how many of you live on Forest already and live in a big old mansion, but I certainly don't, and I don't think many people who do live there can maintain these big properties. I want to say that I agree with the zoning plan. I think the R1 and R2 zoning plans are very good. I think the R3 should be expanded to anything east of Chicago. And we should look to expand our downtown more west on the west side of the train tracks so that there's more economic growth. But I've heard a lot of gatekeeping, a lot of people who live here already who want to keep Evanston elderly, wealthy, and white, that ignore the fact that many who got to this place who were able to buy their homes when it was affordable, and then want to burn down the ladder behind them because they already achieved their housing, their house, and their home values that they want, and to keep others who want to achieve this in the future from having that affordability. Having more supply actually makes things more affordable, believe it or not. We've seen this during the pandemic when the demand for housing in places like San Francisco, Chicago, and New York plummeted, and people were able to get affordable leases. Now there's a high demand, especially for a place in Evanston. People want to live here for obvious reasons. It's an urban city. Not as urban as Chicago, but it's an urban city that has amenities. And people are drawn here because of these amenities, and we shouldn't be gatekeeping future Evanstonians from having this because you are personally against it, because you're inconvenienced or don't want new people living next to you. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Hi, good evening. Patrick O'Connor, 2753 Woodbine. I've lived in my home in Evanston for 27 years, and I couldn't be more opposed to what I see in this proposed zoning change here in Evanston. However, I've also been a real estate developer for 27 years, and I can't think of a bigger gift to the real estate developers of the world than this potential zoning change. So my comments tonight are with my developer's hat on. Right now, the R1 district in Evanston is fairly stable with minimal developer input. As soon as you increase the density and building type to allow up to fourplexes in the R1 district, you open the floodgates to the entire industry of developers who have one mandate in mind, and that's to make as much money as they possibly can. That's how development works. And the way they make money is by building as many big, expensive units as they possibly can, because developers make their money on margin. And there's a lot more margin in expensive real estate than there is in affordable real estate. There's nothing I see in this zoning proposal that speaks to affordability of housing. From what I can see, I see pockets of Evanston where developers will be getting $1,000 a square foot for condos. I also have a few questions. So I have to wonder where the city's getting its data from when we look at the current plan or the proposed plan. I see Envision Evanston laments the fact that Evanston home values have risen 18% over the last 5-year period, but there's no context for that provided. Nationally, the median home sales are up 32% in the last 5 years. Evanston is at a 14% advantage in terms of affordability compared to the national average. So what are we trying to achieve here? Since 2000, another comment, nationally, there has been a huge spike in the number of single-family homes that are owned by investors, and more recently by institutional investors. For example, currently in Atlanta, 25% of all single-family rental properties are owned by institutional investors. I have to ask, what percentage of single-family properties in Evanston are currently owned by investors, and what is the anticipated impact of this potential zoning change on the ownership of Evanston homes by institutional investors? Does Evanston have a target for its investor and institutionally owned residential properties? Envision Evanston highlights the need to conduct a housing needs assessment and other studies to determine the types and qualities of housing needed for Evanston's population. How can you rewrite the entire zoning code before you've done that? Lastly, as a real estate developer for almost 30 years, I've worked with municipalities and zoning professionals throughout Chicago, the suburbs, and across the country. I've never seen a zoning modification of this magnitude rushed through with such haphazard speed as the one before us now. I strongly encourage the city to slow down and consider the impacts on the people who call Evanston home, and not just implement the recommendations of out-of-town consultants. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Next up, Paul Breslin, followed by Jeff Barini, Darlene Cannon, and Nancy Little, I believe is the last name.
Well, much of what I would have said, okay, I'm Paul Breslin, 1635 Hinman. I came to Evanston in 1976 as a Green Assistant Professor at Northwestern, retired in 2013 and stayed. I like living here. I don't live in a mansion. I live in a modest-sized condo on Hinman Avenue. I think the most serious objections, apart from the railroading of the proposal and the lack of focus, is the accusation that we're just resisting change because of privilege. If I believed that the changes made in this plan would ease the economic troubles of disadvantaged populations in this city, I would be for them, and I would be willing to sacrifice some of my privilege to get them. But I have heard from people better qualified than I am tonight that in practice the data does not show that these changes would do that. And I don't think that beating my breast as a guilty white person is a solution to any problems. I want the problems solved. I also would add, and this is not the Land Use Commission's fault, you've acted very honorably tonight, and I commend you for it. This is not the first time the citizens have been railroaded by this mayor and this city council. The 909 Davis thing, the violation of the Open Meetings Act, and a lot of closed-door discussion behind the Northwestern Stadium deal. So there is a history here of trying to ram things through without getting adequate citizen support. I would add, and you can pass this on to the council, I'll say it to them when I get a chance, some of the things that were done early in the process were insulting. In the first meeting about the 2045 plan, we were asked to stick little Post-it notes on a bulletin board. This is not a 6th grade class project. This is a very serious decision, you know. And the other night at a stakeholders meeting of relevant, wards close to downtown, we were asked, raise your hands if you object to higher buildings. Raise your hands if you don't. This is knee-jerk reaction. We haven't had time to think. I only got to read the proposal because Claire Kelly sent it to me. And I had 4 days to deal with this 118-page thing. And I would say that while the goals are hard to argue with, they are glittering generalities, and a lot of the ways to them aren't clear. Lastly, I noticed in the transportation map that there is a transportation desert west of where the high school is, between Dempster and Oakton. There is no bus line running through there, and that's where a lot of the most disadvantaged population is, and I don't see anything about a plan to fix that. So enough sanctimonious nonsense and more problem solving, please.
Thank you, Mr. Breslin. Good evening, Mr. Smith.
You rang?
Yes. You had filed a letter, you had sent a letter earlier today about the proceedings, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to address that real quickly and then have council respond to you on that.
Okay.
So if you want to take just a few minutes and kind of state what your position is, and then I'll let council respond.
Sure, and this is a procedural objection only, so I'm reserving comment on the substance of any agenda item. The notice for tonight's hearing indicated only that the map amendment would be discussed, at least the notice that I got. And you can't discuss a map that refers to categories of zoning districts that don't exist. Someone in the city must have realized this because the text amendment for the districts was then put on the agenda for tonight as the first item. But the text amendment was not noticed for tonight in the public notice. In the tiniest font I've ever seen, it says that the text amendment will be discussed at the next two meetings in December. The notice itself didn't direct anybody in the city to any actual documents, only to a website where you have to go on a scavenger hunt and you have to have 4 documents open, 2 maps and 2 zoning codes, including one on a separate website, the Municode website, to figure out what's being proposed for even one property. Only the most persistent people can wade through that, so I don't think it was real notice. And if you're trying to comment on something that covers hundreds of properties in the city, it's a daunting process. So there's other problems with the process, like only allowing 3 minutes or less for testimony when a person's home, and for most people, their home is their primary asset, and they're maybe counting on it for their retirement, is at stake. It's not the whole truth if you're limited to a couple minutes. But the biggest problem is this: when this commission considers zoning, it does so with respect to a plan. But the new map doesn't jive with the existing plan, and it isn't meant to. So you're being asked to evaluate zoning with respect to a plan that not only hasn't been adopted, but it isn't even to the second draft stage. So you're being asked to work on something with respect to a moving target. And that's a good reason why municipalities don't normally do a plan and zoning at the same time. It's guaranteed not to produce the best product that a community is capable of. So what we're seeing, I think, is not really planning, this thing that's being whipped along. It's more like a cross between lobbying or a last-minute legislative rush in Springfield or just plain bullying. And it's not just unfair to the public, it's unfair to you as volunteers. It's not the best use of your time. You didn't draft this, but you have to sit here and deal with the emotion of folks who are behind the 8 ball on this rushing train. So if I were on this commission, I would make a motion, and I would vote for it, to defer all consideration of any zoning until after we have a comprehensive plan that's both been adopted by the council and at least implicitly, if not explicitly, approved by the voters at the April election. I would defer any further meetings on the comprehensive plan itself until after the new year, and wish my colleagues and everyone in this room happy holidays.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, thank you. Ms. Ruggie, would you like to respond to that, please?
Yes, good evening, Chair Rogers, members of the Land Use Commission. My name is Alex Ruggie. I'm the city's corporation counsel. I'll respond to the legal aspects of Mr. Smith's arguments. Looking at City Code 6346, and it discusses the procedure for review and decision of proposed amendments. It only requires a postcard notice for map amendments. The city code does not require a postcard for text amendments, so that's why only the map amendment was included in the postcard. If you notice, the legal notice that went out in the newspaper that's required by law, it contained both the text and the map amendment, so it was all legally correct. So the proper notice did go out. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I say I've spent at least a half an hour now, if not an hour, looking all over the internet trying to find that legal notice. Most people don't get a print newspaper anymore, and if you go to the ChicagoTribune.com website, you can't find it through a normal search, you can't find it through a Google search. So, and there's complying with the bare minimum of the law, but when we're redoing the entirety of Evanston, I think we should be bending over backwards to create consensus and build public trust.
Please, you're only delaying things by clapping. I know most of you support this, and we'll hear from public later on that, but I'm gonna ask you please to be respectful. At this point, legal counsel has said what they have to say. I'm at the direction of legal counsel on this. And so we will proceed with the meeting this evening, as it was noticed and as it is being presented. And I know you've signed up to speak later as well, so I'll call you back.
No, that's really that's the only thing.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to know, based on Mr. Smith's comment, I'd like to know if it's the appropriate time for us, one of us, if we choose, to make a motion to delay the vote on the zoning until the comprehensive plan is approved. I would like to qualify that. I would like to hear everybody's comments, whether it's on zoning or whether it's on the comp plan tonight. But our vote.
So we will be taking a vote in January. We're not voting on anything until January. I understand your point, and I get your point.
Yeah.
But until we're actually voting on something, we've had a lot of people who have shown up to speak. We've announced things. I would like to get public testimony in.
Right.
And then when it comes time for us to vote, we can address any of those issues.
The point is that, and I know the agenda for the meetings have been set, and they're primarily to address zoning, but without a comprehensive plan that we have all agreed to and the council has agreed to, how can we vote? Comprehensive plan is about setting the goals. When we reviewed that comprehensive plan, we all had comments. We had, some significant comments about what was lacking in the comprehensive plan, what wasn't addressed correctly, a lot of issues. And yet, we're moving on zoning, which is supposed to be based on the goals set in the comprehensive plan. It makes no sense. It makes no sense to me. And so, what I'm asking about is, can we, notwithstanding this meeting, to hear the people that have already come, to say our future meetings should address the comments that we've made on the comprehensive plan, which we haven't gotten back yet.
Right.
Instead of jumping to zoning and then jumping back on the goals and jumping back, I mean, it's just insane. And that would be my motion to do that.
There is a motion that's been made, so I will ask if there is a second. Yes.
Can you just restate the motion?
My motion is that after this meeting, that we would focus on the comprehensive plan and not the zoning, and eventually vote on that comprehensive plan before we take up the zoning. It's backwards right now, it seems to me. So that would be my motion. Is that clear or not? Okay.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? I will just say that I agree with you. We have kind of adopted an agenda and a plan based on what the elected officials have directed us to do. We are somewhat at their
the elected officials are elected by the residents of the city,
They are,
correct?
yes.
So they're representing.
They are.
Okay.
I get it, George, I get it. So the motion that is before us now is to continue with tonight's meeting and then return at our next meeting with a focus on the comprehensive general plan, as I'm understanding your motion correctly.
Correct.
All right. Does staff want to make any comments, anything from legal on that? Okay.
And let me just to say that I understood that we all got the schedule, and frankly, in the very beginning of this, when we talked about process, there were comments about why are we doing this together. But I think none of us really understood the implications of doing both these processes together and sometimes backwards. So we're all learning. These people out here are all learning, and I think we're realizing that we all want this to come out the best way that it can be, and we're realizing that there's problems with that process.
I would say I agree with him. I think we are moving way too quickly with this document or documents. We need to be very careful because once we approve or agree to certain changes, you can't really, once you ring the bell, you can't unring it. And I think we need to take our time and make sure we're going through these carefully, slowly, so that we can do what's best for the community.
All right, any, Commissioner, before I.
Three things. It's been brought to my attention by some people in the council, or, well, anyway, I'm not gonna mention names, but the sense is that one of the reasons why this has been happening at this pace is there's a fear that the incoming council may not be as focused on this as the current council is. I don't know if that's true or not, but the reason I bring it up is I think everybody should be talking to everybody who's running for council and say this master plan and this zoning ordinance that we're looking at, if it doesn't get squeaked through before the election, you need to be in it to win it. That's part of the game. That's part of governing. Governing goes on whether or not you're in the council now or you're in the council later. We still have to be able to count on you. So I would encourage everybody to share that with the people that you are supporting out there that are running for office. The second thing is, if we are delaying this until the 8th, are we getting more time as a result of this? Does staff know if we're getting time on the back end, or are we just compressing this further into the next year where the pressure goes up even higher?
So if I understand your question, you're asking about what implications tabling and
On the
continuing.
back end of it, what happens? Do we get, right, does this get more tense, or do we by default wind up getting more time to work this through?
I think it is based on your motion at the end of the proceedings in terms of when you propose to continue the text amendment discussion or this hearing too.
Okay.
So I think it's all a matter of what you decide this evening.
Okay. And the third thing is, are we gonna be commenting on, are we as a body gonna comment on zoning tonight?
We can, yes, that's the plan, so that after the public
After
weighs
the
in,
comment, we're gonna comment.
we
Okay.
are allowed to respond to comments we hear, have our own comments addressed, that sort of stuff.
Thank you.
But then, everything with zoning would be put on hold until the
After
date
the-
that we continue it to at the end of this meeting.
Okay.
Does that
Thank
make
you.
sense to everybody? Okay.